Good evening. Welcome to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host. Tonight, we're taking a deep dive into a story from North Africa with global implications. A Tunisian court has just sentenced 5 men to prison for their roles in the deadly 2023 attack on the historic Djerba Synagogue on the island of Djerba. The attack, which killed 5 people, including 4 visitors and a security officer, sent shockwaves through a community that had long been a symbol of religious coexistence. The sentences, handed down on February 16, 2026, range from 1 year to life imprisonment. But this verdict is about more than just 5 individuals. It's a story about security, religious freedom, and the complex fight against extremism in a region under pressure. We'll examine the attack, the trial, and what it tells us about the state of Tunisia today. We'll also look at the broader context of rising security concerns across North Africa and the Mediterranean. And we'll debate whether justice has truly been served for the victims and for a nation still grappling with its identity. That's all ahead in our 12-minute deep dive. First, let's go back to that day in May 2023. The date was May 9th. Island of Djerba, a popular tourist destination off Tunisia's southeastern coast, was hosting its annual Jewish pilgrimage to the Djerba Synagogue. The synagogue, believed to be the oldest in Africa, dating back nearly 2,600 years, is a site of profound historical and spiritual significance. Each year, hundreds, sometimes thousands, of Jewish pilgrims from around the world, alongside local Tunisian Jews and curious tourists, gather for a festival of prayer and celebration. It had long been seen as a rare and beautiful example of interfaith harmony in the Arab world. On that Tuesday evening, as the festivities were winding down, a 30-year-old member of Tunisia's National Guard, stationed as part of the security detail, opened fire. He first shot and killed his colleague, a fellow security officer. He then turned his weapon on the crowd gathered outside the synagogue's main entrance. In the ensuing chaos, he killed 4 more people, 2 Jewish pilgrims from France, 1 from Israel, and a dual French-Tunisian national. He wounded 9 others before being shot and killed by other security forces. The death toll stood at 5 victims, plus the assailant. The wounded included individuals from 4 different countries. The immediate aftermath was one of horror and confusion. The Tunisian government swiftly condemned the attack as a cowardly act of terrorism. President Kais Saied visited the site, pledging a full investigation. But questions arose immediately. How could a member of the security forces tasked with protection become the perpetrator? Was this a lone wolf attack, or was it coordinated? The investigation, which has now culminated in this week's verdicts, sought to answer those questions. According to the court's findings, the gunman, whose name was Wissam Khazri, had been radicalized online. He was found to have been in contact with extremist elements. But crucially, the court determined he did not act entirely alone. The 5 men sentenced this week were convicted on charges ranging from knowingly failing to report a terrorist crime to membership in a terrorist organization. The harshest sentence, life imprisonment, was given to the gunman's brother. Prosecutors argued he had knowledge of his brother's extremist views and plans, but did nothing to alert authorities. 2 other defendants received sentences of 15 years each. One received a 5-year term. The 5th was sentenced to 1 year in prison. The court also ordered the 5 men to pay a collective fine of 13,000 Tunisian dinars, which is approximately $4,200 at current exchange rates. Now, let's visualize the core of this verdict. The court handed down a range of sentences to these 5 individuals, reflecting their varying levels of alleged involvement. The life sentence for the brother is the most severe punishment available under Tunisian law outside of the death penalty, which is rarely applied. The 15-year sentences indicate a serious, direct connection to the terrorist activity. The 5-year and 1-year sentences suggest the court found lesser, but still culpable, roles in the failure to prevent the attack. This tiered sentencing structure is key to understanding the judicial narrative. It paints a picture of a network, however small, of complicity rather than a single, isolated actor. The prosecution's case rested heavily on digital evidence, chat logs, browsing history, and communications that allegedly showed the defendants were aware of Khazri's radicalization. The defense, however, argued there was no concrete proof of a coordinated plot. They maintained their clients were guilty of nothing more than familial negligence or failing to recognize vague signs of trouble. This is a central debate in counter-terrorism globally. Where does personal responsibility for reporting extremism begin and end? The verdict suggests the Tunisian judiciary is taking a hard line, intending to send a message that silence in the face of suspected terrorism is a crime. For the victims' families and the small Jewish community of Tunisia, which now numbers fewer than 1,500 people, down from over 100,000 in the mid-20th century, the verdict is a bittersweet moment. On one hand, there is a measure of legal closure. Ari Bittman, whose son Aviel was killed in the attack, told reporters, "Seeing someone held accountable for their role in this evil is important. But it doesn't bring my son back." The community's leaders have expressed cautious appreciation for the government's handling of the case, but continue to plead for enhanced, permanent security around Jewish sites. They note that while the Djerba pilgrimage continues, attendance has never fully recovered to pre-attack levels. In 2024, the year after the attack, pilgrim numbers dropped by an estimated 60%. Last year, in 2025, they saw a slight increase but were still down by roughly 40% compared to 2022. This economic and cultural impact on Djerba is significant. The pilgrimage is a major annual event for the local economy. Let's look at those numbers. The dramatic drop in attendance following the attack represents a severe blow to local businesses, from hotels and restaurants to guides and artisans. A 40% decline 3 years later indicates the deep scars left by the violence, both in terms of security perception and communal trauma. The Tunisian government has invested additional resources in security for the event, but restoring confidence is a slow process. Beyond the immediate community, this case sits at the intersection of several pressing regional issues. First, Tunisia's own political and economic stability. President Kais Saied, who consolidated power in a constitutional move in 2021, has positioned himself as a bulwark against chaos. His government points to this verdict as evidence of a functioning, tough-on-terror justice system. Critics, however, argue that Saied's authoritarian drift and the country's severe economic crisis, with inflation hovering around 9% and youth unemployment near 38%, create the very conditions that fuel radicalization. They ask, is imprisoning 5 men addressing the symptom while ignoring the disease? Second, it highlights the persistent threat of jihadist violence in North Africa. While the Islamic State group, which claimed responsibility for the Djerba attack, has lost its territorial caliphate, its affiliates remain active. In the Sahel region to Tunisia's south, groups linked to both IS and al-Qaeda are gaining ground. Tunisia itself has faced sporadic attacks since its 2011 revolution, though major incidents have decreased in recent years. The Djerba attack was a grim reminder that soft targets, especially those with religious symbolism, remain in the crosshairs. Third, it touches on the fragile state of Jewish heritage in the Muslim world. The Djerba Synagogue is a treasure, one of the last remaining active Jewish spaces in the Arab world outside of Morocco. Its survival is often cited as a point of national pride for Tunisia's secularists. This attack was an assault on that pluralistic identity. The response from the international community has been measured. The United States, under President Donald Trump, and the European Union have expressed support for Tunisia's counter-terrorism efforts while urging respect for due process. Israel's government, now led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, issued a statement thanking Tunisian authorities for their work, but also using the occasion to highlight what it calls the endemic nature of anti-Jewish violence. Some human rights organizations have raised concerns about the fairness of terrorism trials in Tunisia, noting that broad anti-terror laws can sometimes be used to suppress dissent. However, in this specific case, given the horrific nature of the attack, most international observers have refrained from criticizing the verdicts. Now, let's engage in our debate segment. We have 2 perspectives to consider. Perspective 1, this verdict is a necessary and just outcome. It holds individuals accountable for enabling terrorism, sends a strong deterrent message, and provides a form of closure for victims. By convicting not just the shooter but those around him, Tunisia is adopting a modern, proactive approach to counterterrorism that recognizes plots are rarely conceived in a vacuum. It reinforces the principle of societal responsibility. Furthermore, conducting a transparent trial and delivering sentences demonstrates the strength of state institutions even after a devastating security failure. Perspective 2, the verdict is a political spectacle that addresses symptoms, not root causes. Jailing 5 men does little to solve Tunisia's deep-seated economic despair and political alienation that make young men vulnerable to extremist rhetoric. The focus on punitive justice overlooks the need for eradication programs, economic opportunity, and genuine political inclusion. There is also a risk that such high-profile terrorism cases can be used to justify expanding surveillance powers or restricting freedoms for all citizens under the guise of security. The real test will be whether Tunisia can prevent the next attack, not just punish the last one. both perspectives have merit. The truth likely lies in the middle. Effective counterterrorism requires both robust judicial action to dismantle networks and address past crimes, and intelligent, long-term social policy to prevent new ones from forming. For Tunisia, a country of 12 million people struggling with debt, drought, and democratic backsliding, the challenge is immense. The Djerba attack exposed a critical vulnerability. This week's verdict is one step in a much longer journey. As we look to the future, the security of the Djerba pilgrimage in 2026 and beyond will be a key indicator. Will international pilgrims feel safe to return? Will the Tunisian state provide not just a heavy police presence, but also foster the climate of tolerance that made Djerba special in the first place? The answers to those questions will determine whether this verdict is remembered as a turning point or merely a footnote in an ongoing struggle. For Kenya News Update today, this story resonates far beyond Tunisia's borders. In a world where extremism, economic pressure, and social fragmentation are global phenomena, the lessons from Djerba are universal. The need for vigilance, the imperative of community, and the difficult balance between security and liberty are challenges we all face. That's all the time we have for our deep dive tonight. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Kenya News Update today.